Hey, everybody, and welcome to Nightlight Astrology's Weekend Wisdom Series. I'm Alexandra Blair, and I am here joined by my arch nemesis, Whitney Kranz, and Alex Amorosi, our referee.
We're ready to throw down today, Sagittarius
Play nice.
season.
Everybody play nice. I know Mars is in Sagittarius. Play nice.
Yeah, we're going to do our best to keep the outright hatred and secret grudge holding to a minimum. As we talk today about the Sagittarius dignities, we are going to be talking about how Mercury and how Jupiter work in Sagittarius. We've been doing this dignity series for a few months now, and we are finally here at another episode with only two lonely planets to talk about. So we're going to get into those today. But first, I want to let you guys know about Nightlight's Kickstarter, which they do every year to fund the school, the Nightlight Astrology School, and also to fund Adam's incredible content, which he uses to support up-and-coming astrologers, much like those of us on this show who talk to you every weekend. The Kickstarter has some really cool rewards. They have all kinds of stuff in there. You can do a year ahead mini reading from Adam. It's really valuable if you are interested in taking one of Nightlight's classes because you can get an awesome discount if you purchase it in support of the Kickstarter. I know you guys have done that route before.
Yeah, I did. I think I took the horror class and one other through the Kickstarter. It is an amazing deal. And it also really helps the school, and it helps people go with tuition assistance, which I think is something really amazing that Adam always offers and has always offered. I mean, I've known him for a long time now. He's always offered that. And so it's just an amazing program to support and an amazing organization to support too.
Same, yeah. And I think it was the year before last, I got year 2 on the Kickstarter, which just totally blasted off my astrology abilities 100%. And this past year, I actually did the Adam's mini reading, and I know those sold out super fast. And
yeah, those go first every year.
Yeah, I loved that. It was a great way to start my year, with a little bit of grounding for what we can expect in the year ahead. So definitely recommend hopping on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I last year did the bundle of 3 horary readings, which I also am enrolled in the horary class. So in theory, I could have done that for myself, but it never really works to read your own chart. And I have used one of those, and I had a really cool experience doing horary with Adam. It was super spot on, and his reading we were just laughing about it before we got on the show. It was very accurate to me. So you guys can find those. The Kickstarter runs through New Year's Day, and they are trying to always just get at least one more person to support than they did last year. It supports the channel, it supports Adam making content, and it supports the school and all of those juicy free horoscopes that you guys get every year from Adam. So definitely check that out. All right, guys, Sagittarius dignities, it is time. It's time for Alex to take his fabulous extended metaphor off the shelf, as he does for us every month, and let us know what the heck is a dignity and what does it all mean?
Well, gather around and let's talk about a planet being in its domicile. So in Sagittarius, that's Jupiter. Jupiter in Sagittarius is at home. Jupiter's in his hometown. He knows how to get around. He doesn't have to think about anything. He knows where the grocery store is. He knows where the post office is. He knows where everything is. He can just kind of go and do his thing. Mercury is in exile in Sagittarius, or in detriment in Sagittarius, meaning Mercury is in a foreign country. So Mercury, if you think of each sign having its own culture, Mercury is not always equipped to deal with the culture of Sagittarius in a way that would feel immediately comfortable. But that doesn't mean that Mercury can't learn to be in that environment. It just means that Mercury's not at home. Mercury has to learn a new language. Mercury has to learn new customs. Mercury has to learn, even when you're in a foreign country, there's often sometimes these unspoken rules that you might not know, that you might accidentally transgress, or you might accidentally, go over some kind of taboo you don't realize you have, until you learn it being there. And that's very much like the idea of a planet being in exile, in that it's not exiled or shunned or anything like that. it's learning as it goes, and it's working in a culture that's not often familiar to it. But that doesn't mean that it can't. And I actually think that those placements can be some of the most rich placements in the chart, because they're the places where you often tend to expand the most. When planets are in their own domicile, they're very strong, and there's a lot of positivity to that too, but they know what they're doing there. And when planets are not there, it's like in the opposite sign, where Mercury would be the ruler of Gemini, the opposite sign of Sagittarius. So when it's in Sagittarius is in detriment, Mercury has to expand. Mercury has to grow. Mercury has to figure out the culture. And even though it may learn all those things really well, it's never quite a sort of native to that country, so to speak. It's always going to have a little bit of feeling of, I might be a little bit of an outsider here, which is actually, by the way, I don't know if you guys find this, but I find that in readings when planets are in exile or in detriment, there's an outsider type of feeling sometimes that goes on generally in the chart or with the native. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love this extended metaphor. Obviously, in ancient astrology, they used this sort of like complicated hotel and temple ownership schema, which is useful to revisit as well. But part of why I think the Mercury-Jupiter axis of dignity is so interesting to talk about is because Jupiter is obviously the greater benefic, so-called, and Mercury is sort of a neutral planet. Mercury doesn't even have a day or night sect, let alone a status as a benefic or a malefic. And so I think there is something really interesting between Mercury in the greater benefic signs versus the greater benefic of Jupiter in detriment in Mercury signs. I want to get into that, but let's first just kind of open with talking about Mercury in Sagittarius and the sense of this. Alex, what do you think? You're kind of a Sagittarian on staff.
Wait, yeah,
we have two Sagittarians on staff.
We haven't shared our Sag cred yet. I think we better do that first. Alex, what's your Sag cred?
Mercury, Sun, Neptune.
Ooh. Okay, amazing. We'll have we get some real experiential input on Mercury and Sag then. I love it. I also have a Sag stellium. Mine happens to be a little on the malefic side. I have Mars, Saturn, and Uranus in Sag.
Spicy girl.
Yeah. You know it.
Wow, okay. Sagittarius is my 12th house, so can't see it, doesn't bother me.
If I can't see it, it's not there. Can't see it, it's not there.
Having fun, visionary thinking, who needs it? Let's go.
Isn't that kind of cool though about the 12th house? I've experienced this in my life. I know, obviously we're all friends here. That was a big joke that we began with, obviously, haha, on the comments. But you know what? I know that Alexander has several fairly prominent Sagittarian friends, right? And like Cancer is my 12th house. I have several very prominent Cancer people in my life. Isn't it cool how we often, like without doing it on purpose, attract these people from our 12th houses to kind of like bulk up or round out that experience that isn't so easy for us to tap into.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, for sure.
I think it's also, for me, with Sagittarius as my 12th house, my Mercury and Sun are together in Gemini in the 6th house. So any transiting Sagittarius season is happening in opposition. It's actually trying to take me away from my zone of genius down there in the 6th. It's like, come into the darkness, baby. And I'm just like, ugh. But yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. Let's start with talking about Mercury in Sagittarius, or maybe let's start with Jupiter in Sagittarius, right? Like, let's start domicile rulership and just see how we feel into that. Alex, what do you think, and how do you feel about a Jupiter in Sagittarius?
On the surface, will often appear very hopeful, very boisterous, very excited, very kind of big in a lot of ways. But I think Jupiter and Sagittarius. Well, let me stay with this for a second. Jupiter and Sagittarius also is about things that we have to interpret, things that we have to make sense out of, things that we have to taking a set of data and trying to synthesize them into one coherent narrative or meaning. That's why Jupiter a lot of times to me does, not just to me, but does represent religion, philosophy, law, astrology, ancient sciences like that, is because you're taking a lot of different sort of aspects of something and trying to narrow it down into a narrative, but that usually by definition requires some kind of interpretation. Jupiter works more in symbols. Works more in abstract, in representation. And so I think Jupiter in Sagittarius is this wonderful big energy of trying to make sense and meaning out of things. It's not just enough for it to be. It has to have purpose. It has to have meaning. Now, that can happen in very healthy ways, and that can go overboard as well. And that's actually something that can definitely happen with Jupiter and Sagittarius, is going overboard, exaggerated, big. Everything feels much more pronounced. Like, one thing I often think of with Sagittarius season 2, because it comes classically at the holiday time, right? Is from, for us here in the US, from Thanksgiving up to around Christmas time. And those are times of big feelings, both positive and negative. People have these sort of big feelings of getting together or coming together with people, but there can also be very difficult feelings that happen around that time of year, very difficult feelings of loneliness or isolation. Jupiter tends to magnify, exaggerate, and expand. And Sagittarius season in a lot of ways just feels expanded, exaggerated, abundant, but maybe even overly so. Like I've said it before on this podcast, I'm always so grateful for the days after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, because it just feels like Saturn has come along and we're just paring it down. We're just calming it down. So that's my take on Jupiter. What do you think, Whit?
Yeah, well, you stole all my keywords. Haha. No, just kidding.
Now we're in a fight.
Yeah, see? Ooh, it's spicy in here for Sag season. No, I want to unravel the thread about Jupiter and Sagittarius really creating meaning, because I think that is such a key part of this, right? People who have Jupiter in Sagittarius have this huge commitment to understanding, expanding their own mind and their own consciousness, right? To fully understand, but then also apply meaning. It's interesting because we think about Jupiter's other sign, Pisces, right, as this incredibly expansive quality, but it's different in Sagittarius because Sagittarius is the archer, right? The centaur archer with the arrow. There is a fire and a direction to Sagittarius, right? That arrow, then the point is to grasp that meaning, right? Rather than where Jupiter and Pisces is maybe just expanding for the sake of broad, expansive experiences, right? And, I've seen this in my client practice. I've seen this in my personal life. My mom, for instance, has Jupiter in Sagittarius in the 7th house. Well, we say bigger isn't always better, right? She's had multiple marriages, multiple relationships through her life. I am thankful for some of those experiences as well and being able to have learned from them. But what's amazing is that Jupiter in Sagittarius in her 7th house in her chart has helped her create this ability of it's like philosophizing her experiences. Is that a word? Philosophizing? It is now. Maybe that was a little hint of Mercury and Sag. Too.
Cares if it's real, just say it.
Right. But my mom is also a musician, and so she's taken these experiences and like transmuted the experiences into meaning to funnel through her creative expression. And so that's so much of what Jupiter and Sag comes down to for me.
Yeah, I was thinking and just took a second to look it up because just as you're talking about these themes, I let myself wander to the types of people that come up for me naturally. And I was thinking of Tony Robbins, I think he'd hate to be called a motivational speaker, but he's at least that. And you talk about bigness, you talk about stoking and cultivating belief. He does have Jupiter in Sagittarius. He also has Mercury in Pisces, interestingly enough. But yeah, he's a Libra rising with that Jupiter and Sagittarius in the third house. And I think that that is so visible in his work. I mean, one of his most famous books is called Awaken the Giant Within, and he is 6'7" tall. He is an enormous man, right? When I think about Jupiter in Sagittarius and stoking belief, that's exactly the kind of figure that I'm thinking of. And it can happen in these very interesting ways. I also think there's something quite kingly about Jupiter and Sagittarius, and this can run the gamut. I think there can be, depending on what else is going on in the natal chart, right? But there can be the sort of like hardy king that everybody believes in, who makes everyone's visions coalesce into some big overarching, just beautiful vision for the kingdom as a whole. But I think if we veer towards Sagittarian's more nihilistic side, which is in and of itself a philosophy and a belief, and maybe it's one of those ways, Alex, that you were alluding to, where things can come to their sort of natural conclusion. I'm thinking of yet another butchered Lord of the Rings reference, as we love to do here on Weekend Wisdom. I don't know anybody's name, but I can explain to you exactly what I'm talking about. The guy eating the cherry tomatoes, you know?
The guy. Oh.
Give us a little more. A little more.
The Lord. Oh no! I had
talking about.
it. It was Lord. The guy and the guys, the Hobbit singing. What's his name? Lord Deneth something. I can't remember his name. But yeah, he's okay. Alexander, just sit back. Let me take this. Let me take. Where's Adam when I need him?
I knew you'd get me. I knew you'd get it.
Adam would go, it's Lord Denethal. Like,
Yeah. We need a little Adam AI bot, or Lord of the Rings AI, that I should text before.
But you know what? That's so interesting. I never thought of him in that regard before, but that nihilistic, everything's
right
for shit, doesn't matter what we do. So we're just going to eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we all may die. Like that kind of feeling is the part of Sagittarius that I feel like just doesn't get a lot of press, but is very present in it. And I didn't want to interrupt you, Alexander. Did you have the?
No, I Googled it. His name's Denethor.
Denethor.
But no,
sorry,
please continue.
everybody.
Yeah, I don't think that part gets a lot of press either. I think that Sagittarians are revered for being, little social clowns, kind of. Like there's this really deep, sad thing that can run through a vein of a Sagittarian as well.
It's the darkest sign of the year. This is when the darkness is, if we use the zodiac northern hemisphere light cycle for symbology as we do in the ancient system, Sagittarius is where it's the darkest. It's getting darker. There's a sense with Sagittarius that's really interesting, because the other trait that kind of I'm thinking of here is the bluntness that's often associated with Sag. And man, is that something that I have in spades, and I curb it all the time. Thank you, Libra Moon. But there's a sense of like, we don't have time to beat around the bush. Like, just say whatever you need to say. Like, just do whatever you need to do. And that can be a helpful quality, but it can also get into a sense of like that nihilism and an overdoing of that, right? Where it's just like, okay, it doesn't matter what I do anymore. So I might as well just have this sort of like rampant hedonism, type of feeling, because it doesn't really matter what's going on. So I think it's just kind of interesting. Like, we have to, you're balancing this very hopeful buoyance with this sense of, I don't know, dark awareness of the dark is the way I'll put it. An awareness of the dark.
Oh, I have some things to say about darkness and nihilism with my malefic little Sag stellium. Try to be super positive about it, but it can definitely be a bit like, I don't know, popping the balloon, with like nothing left, right? Because you see Jupiter as like this big buoyant balloon, we'll just say, right? But this is a fire sign, so it's like, oh, the balloon gets too close to the fire and pop, there it goes, right? But what I have found is that, and you're so right about that, like almost two faces quality, which is so interesting because we're talking about the opposite on the axis of Gemini right now, where Sagittarius can, yes, be the fun one in the group, the loud one, the party animal, right? The bringer together. But at the same time, if there is maybe a void of that sort of influence, then it's like, well, what the heck is it all for anyway? And what I found is I'll go back to Sag's arrow, right? The archer's arrow is like strong Sag Jupiter needs a focus, right? Needs an outlet, needs somewhere to put their fire. And, to your point, Alex, with like this sense that Sag can be pretty blunt, it's like, well, we don't expect Zeus, big and bold Zeus, right? The god on Mount Olympus, the king of the gods, to like censor himself or like not be blunt with his words, right? That is part of their character, part of his character. So there's something to that quality, right? Where everything is about holding a balance anyway, but like, it's like how Mercury and Sag can also be like way too verbose. You got to meet in the middle.
Yeah. I am reminded of Liz Green's, it's actually in her book on Saturn, but she talks about the fire signs as being the seat of purpose and how all other elements in the astrological world need something to mitigate their experience of life here on Earth. So the air signs use their intellect to mitigate experience, and the water signs use emotion to mitigate their experience, and the earth signs use material security, right? The fire signs are unmitigated. They express. They feel, they express. They are. It's the I am part of the zodiac. And I think it's very obvious how that works for a cardinal fire sign like Aries or for the fixed fire sign of Leo. The king is always the king every day. And the karate chopper is always the karate chopper in Aries, right? Like we see how that works. I think it's pretty interesting to consider that same concept of purpose and expression as it relates to Sagittarius, and particularly Jupiter in Sagittarius, because it's a mutable fire sign. And some of the things that I get most from Sagittarians that I know and love is that mutability, the sense that they could be happy, genuinely happy, doing multiple things. This night could go here, 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 or here, and I'm going to be happy regardless. It is sort of the flip side of that age-old joke story that exists in every culture of the crying clown or like the sad clown. Like on the one side, it's like, I'm going to be sad no matter what we do, or I'm going to be happy no matter what we do. There's like this mutability quality to it that I find really interesting. I remember talking to a Sagittarian friend of mine, and we were in a social situation where everybody was just having this vapid small talk. And of course, my wet blanket ass was like, this is so lame. I want to have deep, intense conversations only. Get me out of here. And he was just kind of roasting me for it. But at the same time, we've had conversations together where he had those same complaints. But on this night, he wasn't accessing that. He was just totally able to have fun anyway. So I think there's this really interesting mutable fire quality, especially with Jupiter there in Sagittarius. What do you guys think about that?
The phrase that I hear Sagittarians say all the time, I say it a lot, is who cares? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, we're just at this. So who cares? Who cares what I say, or who cares what happens? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, but it can go both ways. You also hear Sagittarians say, what's the point? That can be a nihilistic, what's the point? That can also be well, what's the point? What's the meaning? Like, are we going to go out somewhere? Like, what is it? Like, why are we going to go to that place? Like, what's the purpose of us doing that? But there can also be that sense of like, Sagittarius's desire, for anybody out there who has a Sag in your life, they desire meaning and purpose in almost everything that they do. And it took me so long to realize that not everybody is like that. Some people are like, I'm perfectly content just doing something. It doesn't have to have a reason or a philosophy behind it, right? A whole grand vision. But Sagittarius, that's very important. But it also has this there's that quality of like, well, who cares? Like, we're just going to go and have fun. That's the purpose right now. Or we're just going to go and have a conversation. Like, that's the purpose right now. And the thing is with Sagittarius is they can almost be like maddeningly passive for such an active sign. Because it's like, I really am kind of like happy doing whatever because I'm fine.
That's
like,
the mutability piece.
That's the mutability piece. And I love that you brought that up because I had never thought about it in that way before. And I've driven my friends crazy before being like, I really don't care. Like, I just want to hang out and we'll have fun, whatever we do. Like, we could just sit around and talk. It's fine. Because you kind of bring that sense of like, well, this is what we're doing. It's that immediacy that comes with the fire signs too. That all three fire signs have that sense of immediacy. Like, this is what we're doing. We're right here with this right now. So I love that you brought it up in that way. It was beautiful.
Well, and I'll just echo that I think that mutability, when channeled, is part of what can make Sag so fun, right? Is the sense that, like, I'm up for anything, you know? I'll be happy sitting on the couch in my comfy PJs. I'll be happy going to the wine bar down the street or dancing at a concert, you know, down the way.
I think this is bringing up something really interesting when we now consider Mercury and Sagittarius, because as I mentioned, I have my sun in Mercury and Gemini, and I think Gemini can really be the same way, especially as a mutable sign, but it's just genuinely, I would be happy with 100 different outcomes. My Cap rising, not so much. My Gemini sun, let's do it. Whatever it is, I'll do it with you and I'll mimic your accent even. Let's go. But I think a little bit of Mercury in Sagittarius as being really, really skilled at making sense, making nonsense make sense, or making impactful nonsense, or being visionary with nonsense. Let me explain what I mean too, because I'm thinking a little bit about supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, for example, is such a Mercury and Sag phrase for me. I'm like, it's like making magic, or even abracadabra, right? Like this magic phrase with this deep, rich occult history that is nonsense, but it's kind of sacred nonsense. And teasing out that line, I definitely hear and feel the lineage of more creative thinkers, more, I don't know, motivational speakers really isn't the right word for her, but I think of Brene Brown because she's actually a Sagittarius rising with Mercury in the first house in Sagittarius. And talk about someone who presents us alternate perspectives to tried and true things and really pulls out, kind of like Tony Robbins, but we can see the difference between them. Tony is Jupiter in Sagittarius and Brene Brown has Mercury in Sagittarius. I feel like her way of pulling things out is more incisive, and there's also a little more mystery in what she's saying. Like, she is more of that mercurial figure who is going to inspire personal transformation or personal alchemy, or kind of walk you into the crucible of transformation. Whereas I feel like Tony's approach is more of the, I'll lay it out step by step. Here's a book version, here's a course version, here's a retreat version. Let's do it all. Just to illustrate the differences. What do you think about Mercury and Sagittarius, expert Alex Amorosi?
Oh my God. I just love that we have Brene Brown and Tony Robbins as like
I think they're good examples,
here.
yeah.
It's a really good examples. They're so good. Because I have a friend who, him and his dad have done a couple of Tony Robbins events, and he's like, the force of his belief when he's up there, whatever you think about him, God knows there are a lot of opinions about Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
He just forces this hopeful belief into you. That's Jupiter and Sagittarius, right? It's the evangelist in the
I
archetype.
have to say, like, I have a family member who works for him, and I went to one of his seminars when I was 18. We walked across fire. Like, that is the force of magnitude of his belief. I love Brene Brown. I do not think she could inspire me to walk across fire.
No.
I took off my shoes and walked on flames for Tony Robbins, you know?
She'd make you think about why you wanted to walk across the fire. See, that's Mercury and Sagittarius. Like, it's the introspective, like, let me think about the rationale for it. His is just force, sheer belief. Sheer, you can do this, and like imprinting it in someone in that way. Brene Brown, I think you're exactly right. She has that visionary sense that comes through a more academic language and through a sense of like considering and thinking about the ramifications of these bigger ideas that come through a more sort of like logically listed way, is the best way I can say it. But I think it's also about, she also has the ability to tell a story really well. That's something that Brene Brown I've noticed a lot of times. She has this ability to, she's not just laying out facts for you. She'll be like, well, my daughter was home once and we were talking about this and she did this and blah, blah, blah. And it's illustrating it through a story, which is very Mercury and Sagittarius. And it has that feeling, and I always said this about Mercury and Sag, I think it's really important. Mercury and Sag has a feeling of almost on the cusp of a tall tale. It just, it's like sometimes Mercury and Sag is not all the details are exactly as the story happened. Not like Mercury and Virgo, where it's just like, you're reading the stenographer's report back, right? Exactly what happened. Mercury and Sag is more about, I'm telling you a story that may not be entirely true in all the facts, but who cares? It's a good story. It makes the story easier to listen to. It makes it more, you're going to be gripped by it a little bit more. And I don't think that she exaggerates in the sense that she's like telling a tall tale, but she has that sense of being able to tell story in a way that really kind of grabs you and is big in its sort of expansiveness of illustrating but it's illustrating a point. It's not taking the belief and just saying like, here, I'm going to import this belief into you. It's illustrating a point for your mind to take over, which is the difference. I love that. I love these two examples.
Right. And like to that point, I don't know, I'm thinking of, I actually have two regular clients who both have Mercury and Sagittarius, and one of them is a voracious writer. She's so talented. She writes so much. She actually has her moon conjunct Mercury in Sagittarius. So that plays into it, right? But she has this really unique ability. And this is where sometimes I'm like, gosh, Mercury here in detriment and fall, like sometimes I'm like, how can that be? Because I see people work so successfully with Mercury and Sagittarius, right? That is why anytime, you're like grading the paper of your astrology chart, like you're not going to put a big thumbs down on a planet in detriment, right? Because it's not always going to express in that way, especially as we evolve throughout our lifetime and we learn those lessons. But that was a little bit of a tangent just to say, this gal, she is so great at taking these really, really big concepts and distilling them down into things that like actually make sense, you know what I mean? And the way she can even take her life experiences that may have been traumatic, right? And write them in a way that is easily understood by somebody who hasn't necessarily experienced that trauma. Like that's a gift that is totally the Brene Brown gift. But then like, I get it. And I think that when we talk about detriment, when we talk about fall, it's like we know these things aren't always activated, but it might be a season in life where you are learning that lesson. We talked about Sagittarius being such a good, like with Jupiter's sign, being such a good lawyer and understanding of the law and judgment in a different way than, say, Libra, right? But there's this way where like, okay, as a lawyer, you need to argue your case, but you can't say too much. You have to say exactly the right thing, right? To make sure the jury is on your side. And so there is this sort of time in life, I'm talking about this because my other client is a lawyer, and where like, you got to learn how to not say too much, not give it all away, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your previous point, some of what you're talking about, and Alex, you were talking about it too, comes back to me talking about nonsense, making sense out of nonsense, taking these big visionary ideas and pulling them down into digestible pieces. That's something that, I have my Mercury in Gemini. I struggle with, frankly. My Mercury is in its domicile, and I have to tell you, I just want to tell people, I know you don't care about the jargon, but let me just say it out loud. Like it's an exercise for me. I have to say the jargon, and then I'll break it into the story. But I've got to 100% the task of explaining this thing before I can get creative and get fun and break it down for you. And I think that this is where we're getting into something that's really important about the dignity scheme that is unique for Mercury and Jupiter, which is that Mercury in Sagittarius is a planet in detriment, but in the sign of a benefic. And the same is, it's not, when we look at like Mars and Venus, it's benefic, malefic. Here, I actually am not offended at all by Mercury in the sign of a benefic, particularly if the benefic is well placed. There are some of the brightest people in every field have Mercury in Pisces or Sagittarius. And coming back to our Tony Robbins example, he has the sun and Mercury in Pisces too. So there's a lot of beautiful ways that the dignity of Jupiter in the natal chart can play out in terms of dignifying Mercury in Sagittarius in the natal chart as well. So if you have Mercury in Sagittarius, what's the state of your Jupiter? What's going on there? Like, let's try to understand that. And that's how we play astro detective with these charts. But I think it's a little tougher when we get to Jupiter in Mercury signs. Now, Mercury is not a malefic, and we're not totally going to go into this today. But when I think about Jupiter in Virgo, for example, it feels so stingy. Like we're getting into real stingy territory. Or when we think about Jupiter in Gemini, then we're getting into playfully a little incoherent territory, right? But Mercury being hosted by the benefics, I think is, we're never going to find trouble finding somebody who has a brilliant intellect when Mercury is hosted by a well-placed benefic.
Yeah, I think that's so important because you have to, Mercury and Sagittarius particularly may not always be grounded in the Mercury things. It might just get pulled off into outer space somewhere, but it's still, and this would depend on where Jupiter is. And I'm thinking from my own personal example because I have mutual reception between Jupiter and Mercury in my chart. So like they do help each other out really well. And I think it could be different if there's other placements. But Mercury in Sagittarius is the hopeful vision with some logic and systems put into it. In other words, like look at what else I do for work. I do energy work. Now that can be very abstract and out there and kind of nonsense to a lot of people. It can be nonsense. It doesn't make sense. But one of the things I've been able to do since I've been doing this for, I don't know, almost 15 years now, is make sense systems out of it. Make it work in a way whereas I can explain a very abstract concept in very real world analogies. Like a very sort of thing that can seem kind of way out there and be like, I don't quite get it. And like take it, well, it's kind of like this, or it looks like this, or this is like water, or this is like earth, or this is like this kind of example in your life. Mercury can take that and that categorizing that Sagittarius often doesn't resist, but doesn't see the point in. It's like, why would I categorize it when it's just one big vision? This is my vision. Here I am on stage, 6'7", doing all this clapping with the music and the thing and telling you you're going to do it and whatever. And it's just going to be in you now. Like that's Jupiter. But Mercury's like, here are the systems for how this very big abstract thing works. Like just to go back to Brene Brown, she wrote a whole book on categorizing emotions, which are somewhat, are really difficult to pin down exactly what we're feeling all the time. She categorizes it all the way through. I know other people have done that too. She just happened to have this book come out recently that I saw.
But she's trained in kind of in a formal way and also speaks often about systems thinking, which is just a branch of the world. That's a rabbit hole for everybody to go down another time, but it's a little bit of what you're talking about, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, Brene Brown wrote a book called Dare to Lead. Like, it's on my bookshelf over there. And, like, this dare to lead, like, the Jupiterian dare, right? The fire of lead, right? And she wrote a book about it. It couldn't be any more Mercury than that, you know what I mean? It's like, so literal. That's why I love astrology. It's so freaking literal. But I think the other reason why, like, Mercury is just a different kind of planet, right? As the psychopomp, Mercury is able to travel between worlds and exist in the land of the living and in the land of the dead. And that his ability to move here in this space, like despite being in detriment, I think I said detriment and fall earlier. Sorry, I was excited about Pisces in my head, but is just a little like it is so mercurial to be able to be in its detriment and work successfully, in these various examples we've talked about.
Well, because Mercury adapts to where it is. That's one of the things you learn in the ancient system is that Mercury will tend to take on the characteristics of any planet that's especially conjoined. I always find that the conjunction is very strong, but it's other aspects too. Mercury adapts or absorbs those characteristics. So I think that's a great point. He's very able to absorb even an unfamiliar territory and adapt to it.
Yeah. I think we've talked a lot about both of these beautiful planets and the ways that they function in Sagittarius. And I wonder if you guys have any closing arguments. I think we should trot out our favorite, which is if you have a planet in detriment, if you have Mercury in Sagittarius, you know damn well that you are not doomed. And that's important and bears repeating in every episode. But I wonder if you guys have any closing arguments or thoughts about Jupiter in Sagittarius or Mercury in Sagittarius.
I will just say that I think that both are beautiful placements. I think they're all beautiful placements. That's my hyper-optimistic Sag right there. Everything's beautiful. Everything's hopeful. It's great. You're going to be good. But I think that Mercury and Sagittarius hone and honor and love your ability to storytell, to captivate in a lot of ways, to communicate. I think it's really over. It bears repeating that the ability to synthesize information is very, very powerful with Mercury and Sagittarius. Not just to say, like, here's the discrete facts, but you're synthesizing what does it all mean. Pattern recognition is really important for this too, right? You're noticing a pattern in things and then you're communicating out from it. With Jupiter and Sagittarius, I think the balance is always being hopeful and expansive and sort of that force of belief and just noticing the knife's edge where you're going to tilt into Delulu. It's just at that place where it's like, okay, now the hope has become toxic. Like it's been in the fridge too long and it's starting to smell. Like, is this hope or is this delusion? Is this hope or is this, God, I just don't want to make this decision and have rain on my parade. So I think Jupiter has sometimes even in its own sign that never-ending expansiveness is just to watch out for that line where it's like, okay, now I need to like take a second, take a hot minute and figure out where the limit is for this.
Yeah. Whitney, go ahead.
I love that. I can say to Jupiter and Sag people that like that idealism you hold is precious and amazing and a gift that not every other sign in the zodiac has. And the best way to work with that is to find an aim for your arrow, right? Like create and find meaning out of that thing that matters to you. It's huge. It's life-changing. And for Mercury and Sag, like you need to understand why. You need to understand the why between these beliefs and all the things and reconcile the details with the big picture. And that's a freaking gift, right? So if somebody tells you that you've got too many words or you're being too loud or like you just go back to the why, right? Because you know and you understand.
Yeah. To your guys' point, my little trickster Mercury wants me to tell everybody that even if you do walk up to that border of delusion or, you find yourself getting pretty close to a tall tale or something, maybe wink, break the fourth wall and give a wink to the camera.
Yeah.
Like maybe you can be traveling there and know that you're traveling there. When we think about Sagittarius, we think about the archer, but also the centaur archer. So it's like there's even this double-bodied nature in the sign itself and the ways that you can be seen and show yourself. And Mercury is absolutely a friend and an ally in that trickster domain, or even if in that just personal alchemy and fun domain. And I feel like we've really done justice in this show to the Jupiter and the Mercury of it all. Why don't you guys tell everybody how they can find you if they want to chat with you about their Mercuries or their Jupiters?
So you can find me at alexamorosi.com. You can book readings and energy healing with me there. And we can talk all about Mercury and Sag. So all the Sags, come on in. And we will discuss it all. Yeah, that's where you can find me. You can find me on Substack too at The Subtle Universe on Substack.
Gorgeous. And you can find me, book a reading at astroarcana.com. You can connect with me on Instagram at astro.arcana.astrology. And while you are here on YouTube, head over to subscribe to my channel, same handle, astro.arcana.astrology, where we cover each lunation. And we've got a new moon in Sag coming up pretty soon, so you will want to tune in for that.
You can find me at the number 9 Lives Astrology. That's my website, 9livesastrology.com. I'm also 9 Lives Astrology on Instagram and YouTube. I do transit shows every Monday, and then every Friday I do some little astrology fun thing to chew over. Whitney and I recently talked about the Mercury-Mars conjunctions. There's 5 conjunctions happening between them this year, and the second one just happened in Sagittarius. So head over to my channel on YouTube, and you can check that out. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We have so much fun doing this every weekend. Make sure you check out the Nightlight Kickstarter and support Adam and the channel and the school. And we will see you guys next Saturday.
Bye.